You're listening to The Hard Truth with John Deaton. John Deaton is a Marine veteran, lawyer, and best-selling author who stared down poverty, survived street violence, and beat cancer to fight another day. From the streets to the courtroom, Deaton has taken on corporate greed and fought against government fraud and overreach. Always for the little guy, a proud father of 3 girls, Deaton brings you the raw, unfiltered truth that hits hard and holds nothing back. Join us as we dive into his journey, his vision, and what he hopes to bring to the people of Massachusetts.
All right, don't touch that dial or change the channel because it's Sunday at 7 p.m. and you are listening to The Hard Truth with John Deaton on iHeart's WRKO. Everybody, I hope you had a great week this last week. Remember, you can reach me at the show at john@hardtruthshow.com, john@hardtruthshow.com. I want to hear your comments. We've had a big, busy week this last week, both locally in local politics and in national politics. Biggest news would obviously nationally be President Trump meeting and having a summit in Alaska with Vladimir Putin, the president of Russia. First time, I believe, since the mid-1980s that Russia's president met on American soil. And so they met in Alaska. It was a huge event. We'll talk about that later in the show, but that certainly, I believe, was the biggest news. Now, when we talk about local news is also national news, and that has to do with the city of Boston and its mayor, Mayor Michelle Wu. Mayor Michelle Wu in the city of Boston is now at odds in an ultimatum showdown with the Trump administration, with Attorney General Pam Bondi, because this is what happened, everybody. About a week ago, or it could be 2 weeks ago, in the middle of August of this year, 2025, Attorney General Pam Bondi sent letters to Boston and 31 other sanctuary cities across the United States. Now, in this letter, Pam Bondi demanded that Mayor Wu confirm, and she's also demanding this of other, mayors across the land, Chicago and in Washington, not D.C., but the state Washington, like Seattle, places like that. The letter demanded that Mayor Wu confirm what the city's commitment is to complying with federal immigration law. Now, what Pam Bondi is doing in this letter, this ultimatum, if you will, and I'll explain to you why it's an ultimatum, Pam Bondi requires Boston to detail the immediate initiatives that it is implementing that the city is going to take to cooperate and not impede federal immigration law enforcement. Right? Basically, she's basically saying, you've got until August 20. When I say she, I'm talking about Pam Bondi. You got to August 20 there, Mayor Wu, to tell me that you're going to not impede our federal law enforcement officers, our ICE agents. And she said, you better respond to me by August 20th. And Pam Bondi threatened, serious consequences, right? And here's the serious consequences. She said that if you don't comply with the federal government and what we want, well, we may withhold federal funding. Now, we've seen the Trump administration do this, right? They did it with Harvard, and they are doing it with other cities and states where they're holding dollars that normally would be attributed to states or cities and saying, you're not getting this money, right? You're not entitled to federal funds if you're not going to cooperate with the federal government in our policies, our immigration policies. Now, that's threat number one. Threat number two, by Pam Bondi to Mayor Wu, is that, listen, if you guys in these local cities take steps to actually impede our federal immigration law agents, if you impede them, if you interfere with them, we're going to arrest you. We're going to prosecute you for basically harboring illegal aliens, right? There's a federal statute that in the statute, it tells people that if you harbor, it's like harboring a fugitive, right? If you know someone's got a warrant for their arrest and you're hiding them, you're harboring a fugitive. Same thing applies in the federal law to illegal aliens, illegal immigrants. If you take affirmative steps to hide them, to conceal them, to protect them from being detained, arrested, and deported, then you could be prosecuted under federal law. So Pam Bondi is put that out there as well. And then the third thing Pam Bondi said to Mayor Wu was like, another thing we're going to do is we may send a whole bunch of federal law enforcement agents. We'll deploy them to Boston. You know, kind of a threat of inundating the city with federal agents walking around. Listen, that's basically what the letter said and what the letter threatened. So Mayor Wu had a response. And, you know, Mayor Wu is running for re-election this year. She's running against Josh Kraft, who is obviously son of Robert Kraft, the owner of the Patriots. Mayor Wu is winning in the polls. Most people believe that she's going to coast to re-election. And remember, everybody listening to this, that the city board, right, basically 13-0 reaffirmed Boston's sanctuary status, that they want to keep Boston as a sanctuary city. Okay, so Mayor Wu took advantage of this situation, in my opinion, and she held a press conference. And certain politicians went to that press conference. You could see Ed Markey out there. You know, he's running for re-election, as everybody knows. And, you know, he's not going to, it's one of the few times he's in Massachusetts, okay? One of the few times is because cameras are going to be there, and he wants to get his face on the TV as well because he's running for re-election. So, you know, from this point to November 2026, I imagine Ed Markey will be in Massachusetts a lot more than he has been for the last 5 years. So we see him at the press conference, along with other local politicians. And Mayor Wu publicly rejects Pam Bondi's demands. And she says that unlike the Trump administration, Boston follows the laws. She defended the city's immigration policy under the Trust Act. And what the Trust Act is, it just basically says that it limits local law enforcement officers, so city cops, right? Boston city cops. It limits them, their cooperation with federal ICE officers, unless it's a criminal matter. If it's a civil matter, meaning that the only reason is their status, right? Their status, they're illegal, that's not enough. They're allowed to cooperate, allegedly, even though they're not, if you're dealing with a rapist or a murderer or something like that. Now, we know that the Wu administration and the Healy administration here in Massachusetts has not cooperated with ICE in those criminal matters, because we know that they have not detained people because of ICE. When ICE requested a detainer on someone who is a child rapist, they've actually not prosecuted that child rapist or held them. They've actually relocated that child rapist to a different hotel after he raped a child. We had John Featherston on, who was a former manager of one of these hotels, and he explained all that. So, but under the law, the Trust Act, local police officers can cooperate with ICE if it's a criminal matter, but if it's just their illegal or legal status here, then they're prevented from cooperating. Okay, and Wu basically justified that position, that policy, and said that it's the way it should be. Now, Wu criticized Bondi's threats as unconstitutional. She said it's coercive, and she reaffirmed that Boston will remain a beacon of freedom. And she said a beacon of freedom and safe for all. Now, I paused when she said safe for all, because if you go to Mass and Cass, you'll see people dealing drugs, using drugs. You'll see these fentanyl zombies who are just standing there. They look like they're like almost performing, because they're like half asleep, half awake, leaning over, but they're like frozen like a statue because they're so drugged out of their mind. There's people that are getting robbed in Boston Commons. There's children that are potentially stepping on needles and things like that. So, when she calls it the safest city in America, there's a lot of local residents who would take issue with that characterization and would say that Mayor Wu is lying or certainly exaggerating. So, listen. I knew this was going to take longer than one segment because this is a big deal. You are listening to The Hard Truth with John Deaton. We will continue talking about Mayor Wu and Pam Bondi when we come back. Welcome back to the show, everybody. I'm John Deaton, and you're listening to The Hard Truth on WRKO. We have been talking about the showdown in Beantown, Mayor Wu versus Pam Bondi. So Bondi gives this ultimatum, sends this letter, says you got to do these things or you could face prosecution, you could face being arrested. And Mayor Wu's response is F you. Yeah, I mean, that's really what Mayor Wu said. And people nationally are talking about it. People locally are talking about it. You got people in the local media here in Boston saying, arrest Mayor Wu, prosecute her. She is actually protecting these illegals. She's not cooperating with ICE. She's taking steps to impede the deportation of people who are here illegally, including criminals. And we want her arrested. You got a lot of people certainly that are Republican-leaning and some independents that feel that way. And, of course, people on the left think that that's crazy. And it is making national news. Now, I'm going to play a clip first of Steve Miller, who is obviously in the White House. He is a big part of Trump's immigration policy. Some would call him the architect of Trump's immigration policy. So let me play what he said on Sean Hannity on Fox. Check this out.
Let me just break down for your audience, Sean, how severe the crime committed by these sanctuary cities is. So you'll have a situation where local police in Boston will arrest an illegal alien who's a child predator. And ICE will then send what's called a detainer request or a hold request, and will say, don't release this person, hand them over to ICE, and we'll remove this child predator from our community. Instead, these sanctuary mayors will order the police department to ignore the federal request to set them free out of the jail, out of the prison, and they will go back into the community, and then they will reoffend. They will hurt another little girl. They will hurt another little boy. And then ICE has to spend weeks scouring the community to find this public safety threat. What they're doing, Sean, is evil, and President Trump will see that they are held to account for their crimes.
Okay, so Stephen Miller not holding back. Obviously he's referencing Boston and saying that Trump is going to hold people responsible. Now, a big person in the conservative movement is Charlie Kirk. He has come out and recommended that President Trump arrest and prosecute Mayor Wu. So let's tune in here and listen to Charlie Kirk and what he's recommending. We're going to play this clip. It's going to be a few minutes, so bear with me, but I think it's worth the discussion. Check it out.
Long past time for us to impanel a grand jury and make a test case out of Boston Mayor Michelle Wu. She can run her mouth, but we will not put up with a neo-Confederate fractionalization of this nation. This is Michelle Wu openly saying that she's going to defy Donald Trump in the city of Boston. It's long past time to impanel a grand jury and to arrest her. Play cut 403.
Silence in the face of oppression is not an option. The U.S. Attorney General asked for a response by today. So here it is. Stop attacking our cities to hide your administration's failures. Unlike the Trump administration, Boston follows the law. And Boston will not back down from who we are and what we stand for.
They are collaborating in a foreign invasion and looting of the United States of America. You are the lawless one. Now, this clip is the key. This is Stephen Miller last night on Hannity, who went into great detail. I think it's time for this Department of Justice to make a test case out of Miss Wu. It is technically, they have this like legal loophole, like, oh, we can decide not to collaborate as long as we're not contradicting. She is admitting to harboring illegal aliens. Many people like Harbinger Singh, the illegal U-turn guy. How many of those people right now are in your communities? Every single one of them needs to be deported back to their country of origin. Play cut 407.
So you'll have a situation where local police in Boston will arrest an illegal alien who's a child predator. And ICE will then send what's called a detainer request or a hold request, and will say, don't release this person, hand them over to ICE, and we'll remove this child predator from our community. Instead, these sanctuary mayors will order the police department to ignore the federal request to set them free out of the jail, out of the prison, and they will go back into the community, and then they will reoffend. They will hurt another little girl. They will hurt another little boy. And then ICE has to spend weeks scouring the community.
Listen to that. So you have a pedophile in Boston who is arrested. ICE says, hey, we're going to remove him for you. And Boston says, no, we're on their team, not your team. This is happening thousands and thousands and thousands of times a day. This is also why cities will get raids. We do have federal supremacy in this country. This is the new Confederacy. We are on the verge of a nullification crisis. We are on the verge of the new nullifiers. This is an act of open rebellion against the United States federal government.
Okay. So, Charlie Kirk played the same clip that I played, but it was worth hearing again. And the reason is because Boston is being talked an awful lot about across the land. It is becoming ground zero. Just like open borders. When I ran against Elizabeth Warren, I said, listen, everybody out there in the world thinks that Massachusetts is not a border state. It's actually ground zero in the southern border crisis the immigration crisis because of our right to shelter law comes here, and then the governor who's allowing the sanctuary state basically says, I'm going to put them up in a hotel, and I'm going to pay for them, and I'm going to do their dry cleaning, and I'm going to do their Ubers, and I'm going to give them free health care, and I'm going to give them everything, and it's going to cost us $4 billion in 4 years. And so we've been ground zero, and we're ground zero now in this fight. But the question for you out there in the audience listening, do you think that the Trump administration should actually arrest Mayor Michelle Wu like Charlie Kirk recommends? He calls it a test case, and pursue a prosecution of her, make her the example. Now, what do you think? So I want you to email me at john@hardtruthshow.com, john@hardtruthshow.com. Tell me what you think. Do you think that Mayor Wu should be arrested and prosecuted? Because you're getting more and more calls across the country and locally for that to happen. And so listen, now let me put on my federal prosecutor hat. As many of you know, I was a former federal prosecutor. So let's first talk about what would happen. If you're Michelle Wu and her team, do you think that she wants to be arrested? Well, I'm going to tell you what I think. I think that Michelle Wu and her political team are sitting right now, they're hoping and they're praying that President Trump gives Pam Bondi the authorization to arrest and begin prosecuting Mayor Wu. Listen, Mayor Wu is in the middle of a re-election. If she were to actually be arrested, that would be worth $1 billion in advertising. Not only that, but Michelle Wu would become a hero, a martyr for the left. She's fighting President Trump, and she's not giving in any grounds. And look, a sitting mayor of one of the major cities in this country, in Boston, Massachusetts, where the fight for freedom first began, the first shots of the Revolutionary War, the cradle of liberty. She's being prosecuted. And so, yeah, I think they're sitting there saying, please arrest me, please arrest me. I think she's going to win her election by significant if they arrest her the way Boston is, the way the voting is, how they 13-0 to reaffirm its sanctuary status. I think she'd win. She might win by 70% because of all the publicity she will get and how she'll be held up as a hero to the left and to Democrats. So I think she wants it, right? I think she's daring Pam Bondi to do it. But is there a basis, right? Now, I got to be a lawyer because I know some of you out there are saying, well, of course, she's not cooperating with the federal government, then of course she can be arrested. Well, of course, anybody can be arrested. Hell, I was arrested. I wrote about it in my book. It got dismissed. It was frivolous, but I got arrested. Anybody can be arrested. The question is, under the law, can she be successfully prosecuted? All right. And when we come back from the break, we're going to go over that. But this is what you should know for right now. In order to prosecute her, this is what you have to prove under the federal law, that she had knowledge or reckless disregard that a person is an undocumented person. Number one. Number two, that Mayor Wu took affirmative action to substantially facilitate their illegal presence here in America, or she shielded them from detection, and that she had the specific intent to violate the law. That is what must be proven. We're going to go through it when we come back from the break. You're listening to The Hard Truth with John Deaton. Okay, welcome back to the show. Remember, you can reach me at john@hardtruthshow.com, john@hardtruthshow.com. So I gave you the elements, right? Specific intent to violate the law, affirmative action to actually shield them from detection or arrest, and that you have a reckless disregard that the person is in fact a undocumented individual. Now, can the government prove all three of those? Now, here's an easy example for everyone. I want you to imagine this is an easy way to prove someone is harboring an illegal alien that violates our immigration laws. Let's say that you know that your neighbor has an illegal, undocumented migrant living in the house. And ICE agents show up. And those ICE agents knock on the door to your neighbor. And you see the illegal migrant coming out of the back door. And you then say to that migrant, "Get in my car with me and I'll drive you away." And that illegal migrant gets in your car and you drive that person to your Cape Cod house. And then you hold that person in your Cape Cod house while the ICE agents are trying to find that person. And then you hide that person, feed that person for several months. It doesn't matter. It could be several hours. You're still guilty. I think you get it. That is a classic example of someone who could be found guilty of violating the law. Okay, but you got to understand, harboring someone is not broadly defined. The courts require more than non-cooperation, passive non-cooperation, not helping the federal agents is not the same as affirmatively taking steps, right? So if you don't help the federal agents, that's not the same as you getting a guy in your car and driving him away to escape from ICE, okay? And so sanctuary policies are sort of passive in nature under the law. They basically say to the cops, you and the mayor and all of them, that you're just not allowed to help, right? You're not allowed to help, but that doesn't mean you take steps to hide. Those are the differences. So not assisting federal agents, such as declining ICE detainers that Stephen Miller were talking about, or not collecting immigration data. Those are two examples of that is not cooperating, but it doesn't meet affirmative action that's usually required under the law. So this, for those of you out there who are upset that they're not helping ICE and want to arrest it, well, you're not going to win that case. I'm sorry. It's just the law. It's the way it is. Under our laws, a lack of cooperation does not equate to concealing or shielding someone from detection, which is what's required. The second thing you got to understand is that there's a thing called the 10th Amendment, which reserves rights to the states. And many Republicans out there, would cite the 10th Amendment. A lot of Republicans cite the 10th Amendment for many things, whether it's related to, gun issues, abortion, whatever. Now, Charlie Kirk in that clip said it's a test case. President Trump, you need to arrest Mayor Wu because it's a test case and take it up. What that means is he means take it to the Supreme Court, because the Supreme Court would need to say that federal immigration law preempts state or local law sanctuary policies, okay? Now, the 10th Amendment doctrine that I was referring to, it's actually been pretty well settled. And that means that the federal government can't force a state or local government to carry out federal regulatory programs, right? So if you're a federal ICE agent, you can't force a local sheriff or a local Boston police officer to arrest or detain the illegal immigrant. right? So imagine an ICE agent is out there and there's two illegals and he gets one of them. And there's a Boston City police officer standing next to him. Now, and he says, you need to hold this illegal while I run and go catch that other illegal. Right? Now, that local police officer under Mayor Wu's policies, right, under Governor Healy's policies, can't cooperate. Now, if I was a cop, I'd have a hard time not cooperating when I'm talking about a fellow law enforcement officer, maybe a Fed, and I'm a statey or something like that. But I'd have a hard time not assisting in enforcing the laws of the United States. But maybe I'd get fired. Who knows? But the point is, under our 10th Amendment doctrine, a federal agent can't force that state cop or that city cop to help facilitate the arrest, detention, deportation of these illegals. I know it doesn't make a lot of sense to people out there. I know that some of you are going to get mad. Don't get mad at me. I'm just telling you the way it is in the law. And I'm telling you what the Supreme Court has said in the past. So this is what would happen. Let's play it out. Mayor Wu gets arrested. It goes to federal district court. Federal district judge, Mayor Wu, is going to say, listen, we have a right to shelter law in Massachusetts. So when I put in a illegal in a hotel, I'm not concealing them. I'm just complying with the law. I'm not trying to break federal law. I'm complying with state law. That would be an argument that she could make. So the bottom line is the federal district court judge is going to rule in Mayor Wu's favor. No doubt in my mind. And then the government, the United States government, Pam Bondi as Attorney General, would have to appeal it to the First Circuit. And I'm here to tell you, as someone who's practiced in the First Circuit, who's practiced in the district court in Massachusetts, federal district court, First Circuit is going to rule in Michelle Wu's favor as well, and basically apply that 10th Amendment doctrine and basically say that the feds can't force these local officers and officials to cooperate with federal immigration law or federal immigration agents. So then it goes to the Supreme Court. Now, the question here is, would 5 out of the 9 justices agree with the Trump administration, this test case that Charlie Kirk's talking about? Would they say, yes, we are now going to say that federal immigration law preempts all state sanctuary policies, and if you comply with sanctuary policies, that is an affirmative contradiction of federal law, and you can be prosecuted successfully? Can the Trump administration get 5 of those justices to do it? We know they're not going to get the 3 liberal ones. We know that. So we know we have 3 votes that's going to find that you can't do what Charlie Kirk wants to do lawfully. Now, the question is, what will Neil Gorsuch say? What will Comey Barrett say? Amy Comey Barrett? What will Kavanaugh say? Alito? I'm pretty sure I know what, Clarence Thomas and others would say. But the bottom line is, if you made me make a prediction, I would say that Amy Comey Barrett and Neil Gorsuch would likely rule with the 3 liberal justices on this issue and say that the states' rights can't be forced the way that the Trump administration would want them to do. So that's what I think. I don't think that you should arrest Mayor Wu. I think that it didn't work for the Democrats, did it? And I think everybody needs to take a pause. They prosecuted President Trump. He was in court after court, New York court, civil court. He was going to face Atlanta court, special prosecutor court. I mean, he was in court everywhere. And the American people, a majority of the American people voted for President Trump, despite the fact that the Democrats were out there calling him a felon, calling him, someone, a rapist, all the things that they did. It backfired. The American people don't like lawfare. They don't like when you take it that extreme and you start prosecuting your political enemies. It's a lot like when some people said, oh, President Trump needs to deport Zohan Mandami in New York, the guy that's going to become the next mayor of New York City. He's a Marxist, a communist, a socialist, and we need to get rid of him. And I'm out there saying, are you crazy? You win by presenting better ideas. You don't win by prosecuting and hauling into court your political opponents. So I think it's a dumb idea. I know some of you out there are going to disagree with me. Write me at john@hardtruthshow.com. Tell me how wrong I am. Maybe I'll bring you on the show and you can school me. Even if we disagree, we should talk about these things because we got serious problems. You're listening to The Hard Truth. I'm John Deaton. When we get back, we'll talk about that Trump summit. Welcome back to the show. You're listening to The Hard Truth. I'm John Deaton. Listen, everybody, you can follow me at John E. Deaton, #1. John E. Deaton and the #1 on X. You can read Food Stamp Warrior, my book, on Amazon. You can order it if you want to know everything there is to know about me, the good, the bad, the beautiful, and the ugly. I hold nothing back. I can assure you that if you read Food Stamp Warrior, it is like no other book out there. It is raw. I lay everything out. You'll be surprised when you read it that I ran for public office. Actually ended up being a positive because Elizabeth Warren couldn't find anything against me that I don't admit to in that book. I talk about many things. I talk about the mistakes I've made in life. I talk about the lessons I've learned in life. I talk about my scars that I have. I talk about issues that I have. I talk about being raped as a child and what that caused me, how it caused me to act out later in life because I didn't deal with that trauma. So I'd like you to read the book because I'd like to hear what you have to say after you read it. It is a book that is about overcoming adversity, but really overcoming the greatest obstacle that you're ever going to face in this world, and that's yourself. Because our biggest obstacle in life is ourselves. And I talk about how I almost didn't make it. But thank God I dealt with issues that I didn't all those years. And I've been given a second chance. And I'm going to try to do everything I can with it. Actually, even thinking about running again. Because I got to tell you, I sat there and I watched Ed Markey out there with Michelle Wu. And I see all these things that he's saying. He is such a hypocrite. He's never faced a real opponent before, in my opinion. Everything this guy stands for is fake. He preaches the Green New Deal, but he hasn't lowered his own carbon footprint. Think he's got solar panels on his house? Nope. Think he drives an electric vehicle? Nope. Guy's just the epitome of term limits needed. For 50 years, that man has been in Washington, D.C., living in the bubble. And leave it to a career politician who has spent 50 years, that's 5-0, to say, I need another chance. Give me a chance. It's ridiculous. So anyways, I digress, right? Let's talk about this. I got 10 minutes left. I need to talk to you about the other big news of the week, and that is President Trump's summit with Vladimir Putin. And after he had his summit with Vladimir Putin, he had a summit with Zelensky. And this is a big deal because remember when Trump ran, he said he was that the war would not have happened, that Russia would have never invaded Ukraine if he was president. And Putin actually said that at the summit. He was asked by a reporter and he said, yes, it's true. If President Trump had been the president, not Biden, then he believes that he would have never invaded Ukraine. And so, listen, they meet in Alaska, and I can tell you what's on Trump's mind. I think he just wants to end this war. He wants peace. I think that even if you're a Trump hater, you should be able to see that the man sincerely does hate war. When he talks about children dying, when he talks about all the needless deaths, I don't think he's faking. I think he's sincerely. Now listen, leave it to Trump to never let an opportunity to be a showman expire, though, because as him and Putin were walking down the red carpet outside, Trump had bombers and fighter jets, stealth jets flying overhead, sort of showing Putin, yeah, that's America, baby. We are the greatest military in the world, and you're in Alaska on our soil, so let me remind you just who we are. A lot of people criticized it, but I think it was pure showmanship, and it was Trump being Trump. And listen, I think Trump has a selfish motive, and that is I think that he longs for a Nobel Peace Prize. He's made a lot of peace agreements, whether it's with Iran and Israel, whether it's with Armenia, whether it's with the Congo. And if he could negotiate a deal, I think he would legitimately be up for a Nobel Peace Prize. And I think that that's one of his dreams in the world, to get it. So we know what Trump wanted. Zelensky, it's all about survival, folks. Some of you may not know this, but Russia controls about 20% of all Ukraine territory. And Zelensky shows up. This time he's in a suit, so you know it's serious, right? He put a suit on it. He didn't have a tie, but he looked good. He had a black suit on. But listen, he's here for survival. Ukraine is losing the advantage on the battlefield. So he needs money. He needs weapons to keep fighting. And European leaders are all involved because they want stability in Europe, and they have some serious fears. Now, what was interesting about this meeting is that before the meeting, Trump insisted that we need to have a ceasefire. Listen, whenever you negotiate peace, the first thing you got to do is stop killing each other. The first thing you do is you put the guns down and stop firing at each other, and you agree to a ceasefire. But after the meeting, Putin made it clear that he doesn't want a ceasefire. Zelensky wants a ceasefire because Ukraine's losing the advantage on the battlefield. All experts right now are pretty much in agreement of that. And again, Putin's in control of 20% of the Ukrainian land. So I think it's fair to say that Zelensky wants a ceasefire more than Putin. And Putin's playing hardball. And after that meeting with Putin, Trump put out on social media, he said to Zelensky and the world, look, Ukraine's not going to become a member of NATO. That's a line in the sand for Putin. It's not going to happen. And he said that Ukraine is going to have to give up some concessions of land. That Russia's in control of 20% of the land, so Russia's going to get something. Now, Crimea, everybody's got to remember that Russia annexed Crimea, took it over in 2014 under Barack Obama. And Barack Obama didn't do anything, just let it happen. And so Zelensky is acting as though Russia has to give Crimea back. And that's just not going to happen. The best deal that Zelensky can hope for is that he gets the security guarantees that America and Europe will protect Ukraine if Russia or anyone else ever attacks it again. But Zelensky's going to have to accept that Crimea is Russia's now. Whether that's right or wrong, it's just the way it is if you're going to get peace. And the question is, how much of that 20% land that Putin's in control is he willing to give back to Ukraine? So there's a lot at stake. Trump's in his element because he's trying to negotiate a deal. Zelensky claims he's not going to give up land and that he can't. He even wants Crimea. But Russia says that they're okay with certain security guarantees as long as NATO's off the table. And so, we're going to find out. Trump said that they're close to a deal, but still far away. Leave it to Trump to tell you both things. Trump, after the meeting, told Zelensky that he have to make a deal. He even said that, look, Russia's a big power, Ukraine's not. The reality is, after that meeting, the European leaders come, and everyone made a big deal about the European leaders coming there. Listen, Trump's goal is to negotiate peace and then make sure that America doesn't have to pay for everything, that the European leaders and the European countries are paying for it. But you can bet that Trump wants in on rebuilding Ukraine because that's going to go to American businesses like Vanguard and BlackRock and military contractors. So that's where we stand. The next step, obviously, is to get a trilateral agreement, a meeting. That's where it's going to be Zelensky and Putin in a room with Trump acting as a moderator, mediator, and negotiate a deal. Do I think a deal is going to happen? Listen, I think this is what's going to happen. We got to remember over 1 million people have been killed or wounded in the Ukraine-Russian war. It's the deadliest war in Europe in 80 years. Again, Russia controls 20% of Ukraine. They control 3/4 of the most valuable region, which is the region that has the rare metals. Obviously, Putin's got his eyes on that, but so does Trump. So I think this is what's going to happen. Trump's going to put a deal together where Ukraine has to give up Crimea and some other piece of land, and then he'll get the guarantees from America. Trump will say, America comes in, we participate in their rare minerals, we get those rare earths, we help rebuild Ukraine, we make European leaders pay for it, and America will protect you in the future. And if Zelensky doesn't take that deal, then I think Trump is going to turn on Zelensky. Now, the flip side, if Trump believes a deal is in best interest of everybody and fair to Putin and Putin doesn't, I think you're going to see Trump get aggressive on Putin and implement sanctions. See you next week.
You're listening to The Hard Truth with John Deaton. John Deaton is a Marine veteran, lawyer, and best-selling author who stared down poverty, survived street violence, and beat cancer to fight another day. From the streets to the courtroom, Deaton has taken on corporate greed and fought against government fraud and overreach. Always for the little guy, a proud father of 3 girls, Deaton brings you the raw, unfiltered truth that hits hard and holds nothing back. Join us as we dive into his journey, his vision, and what he hopes to bring to the people of Massachusetts.